get on that? I had one.
On September 11th, 2001, our world changed. A plane carrying 92 passengers was hijacked to hit the northern tower of the two twin towers located in the American city, New York. 20 minutes later, a second plane would hit the other tower. These would be the first of 4 total planes to attack the United States on this day. They would lead to controversial protection bills and motions such as Anti-Terrorism Act, as well as cause mass paranoia that still exists to this day. A third plane would hit the United States of America's Pentagon. This was their American Defense Headquarters, located in their capital, Washington, D.C. The fourth and final plane would be crashed in a rural field in Pennsylvania by the passengers heroically overtaking their hijackers. This would be their last acts on Earth. Less than 12 hours after the attack, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, would launch Operation Eagle. Operation Eagle consisted of 830 crew members from 13 different nationalities, as well as 7 different aircrafts. They would be sent to patrol and protect American skylines during this period. Canada would also be quick to implement the Emergency Security Control of Airline Traffic Plan. This was a measure usually reserved for times of war. But this is what the attack was to us, and it's what it was to the enemy as well. For Al-Qaeda, it was an act of holy war. For Canada and the rest of the world, it was a war of terror. This attack would take a total of 2,996 lives, and the upcoming war only so much more. But who was behind this attack, and why did it mean war for Canada? Osama bin Laden was the lead planner and organizer behind the 9/11 attacks. He's also the founder and first general emir of the Al-Qaeda organization. They set up many camps in Afghanistan with the intent of training Muslim militants to act out their terrorist attacks. This was all done in partnership and under the patronage of the Taliban militia of Afghanistan. They would wrongly use religion to weaponize and justify their terrorist attacks against Western countries and Western civilizations. This was all done in partnership and under the patronage of the Taliban militia of Afghanistan. On September 12th, a day after the attack, NATO would decide to invoke Article 5 of the NATO Charter. Article 5 states that if one member of the NATO alliance is met under armed attack, it should be considered as an armed attack against each and every other member of the alliance. Canada, the United States, and 11 other countries were allied under the NATO alliance in 2001. The attack was geared towards the United States of America. And as a NATO ally, this attack was to be considered geared towards Canada as well. On October 7th, 2001, a NATO coalition led by the United States would lead to the invasion of Afghanistan. And this is how Canada goes to war.
The war in Afghanistan was the longest war that Canada was involved in. Our first contribution was entitled Operation Apollo, which took place in October of 2001. In the waters near the region of Afghanistan, 900 soldiers from Halifax surveyed, transported supplies and personnel, as well as evacuated casualties. It wouldn't be until later that year that the first soldiers would step foot onto Afghan land, with more following a month or so later. These soldiers were a part of an elite group named GTF-2. Back at home, Canada was facing some changes. Security measures became more extreme, especially in airports. What was once a 30-minute process now turned into a multiple-hour-long wait. Thanks to the Anti-Terrorism Act, which was implemented soon after the attacks on September 11, 2001, government and police agencies were granted much more power when it came to the prevention of future attacks such as these. Of course, the inevitable had to happen eventually. The Tarnack Farm incident, which occurred on April 17, 2002, was the first and one of the most devastating casualties. 4 soldiers from the 3rd Battalion Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry were killed, bombed by US pilots who had been mistaken, thinking that they were enemies. 8 more were injured in this friendly fire incident. Canada's most dangerous mission was Operation Medusa, which took place on September 2, 2006. Our country had not fought a combat this major in over 50 years. The goal was to defeat the Taliban in order to control the government and preserve freedom. Tanks, artillery, and infantry soldiers played major roles in this operation, and many of our soldiers were needed. In the end, 12 Canadian lives were taken from us. Combat for Canada ended in 2011 when a new strategy was adopted. Security responsibilities would gradually be transferred to the Afghan military. This unfortunately didn't work out at first. Due to constant attacks from the Taliban and lack of preparation, it seemed impossible to hold them off. This is when a new responsibility for Canada arose. Canadians would now be in charge of training Afghan military, in hopes that with their help, the outcomes of this new strategy would improve, in hopes that Afghanistan would be as safe and secure for their people. In 2011, Osama bin Laden was killed, bringing finality to the terrorism attack that happened so long ago. In March of 2014, after giving much aid and sacrifice, Canada withdrew from the war in Afghanistan along with NATO.
The Afghanistan war was a complex conflict that resulted in 158 Canadian soldiers losing their lives. The Highway of Heroes, a route along Highway 401 from Trenton to Toronto, serves as a symbol of gratitude and natural grief among the fallen soldiers. Among the brave men and women who have served, 3 stand out to us: Sergeant Karajanis, Sergeant Ford, and Captain Daw. Their stories reflect on the courage and sacrifices inherent in military service. Sergeant Ford's experience was particularly poignant, as he was severely injured in a friendly fire incident in Kandahar. His injuries underscored the dangers faced by soldiers and the sacrifices made in the line of duty. On the other hand, Sergeant Karajanis and many soldiers just like him made a notable impact through their leadership and dedication to the mission. Their efforts not only advanced the mission's military objectives, but also built a foundation for a long-term stability. Sergeant Karajanis and soldiers like him's legacy is a testament to Canada's broader scope of involvement in Afghanistan, exemplifying the integration of combat operations in humanitarian and developmental goals. His death in Afghanistan in 2008 was a profound loss that affected the military community and beyond. Captain Daw, a remarkable leader and trailblazer, led a battle group in Afghanistan. Tragically, he lost his life in 2007 while on a mission, leaving a legacy of courage and a profound impact on those who served with him. When these soldiers and many others were repatriated, their bodies traveled the Highway of Heroes. Thousands of Canadians lined the road in grief, holding flags and paying their respects, transforming the highway into a living memorial. This outpouring of support illustrated the nation's collective mourning and appreciation for the sacrifices made by the soldiers and their families. The stories of Sergeant Karajanis, Sergeant Ford, and Captain Daw remind us of the human cost of war and the bravery that comes with service. The Highway of Heroes stands as a testament to the sacrifices made by these soldiers and their families, fostering a culture of remembrance and honor for generations to come. We are taught about the grief through our Silver Cross mothers. These are honored women in Canada who have lost a child while serving in the military. They wear a silver cross as a symbol of their sacrifice and commitment. This emblem not only represents their personal loss, but also acknowledges the bravery of those who serve and the profound impact of their sacrifices on families and communities. Captain Godard, the first Canadian female soldier to die in combat since World War II, was a member of the Royal Canadian Artillery in Afghanistan in 2006. She was known for her strong leadership and commitment, breaking barriers for women in the military. Tragically, she was killed by enemy fire during a firefight in Panjwai on May 17, 2006. Godard's death had a profound impact on Canada, as she was a role model for many women who aspired being in the military. Meanwhile, Michelle Lang, a Canadian journalist who was reporting on the Afghanistan war, was the first Canadian female journalist to die while covering a combat mission in Afghanistan on December 30, 2009. Her work highlighted the challenges and sacrifices faced by soldiers and those who sought to tell their stories. Both women represent the courage and commitment found in their respective fields, and their legacies serve as reminders of the personal costs of conflict. Their sacrifices continue to resonate, inspiring ongoing discussions about the roles of women in the military and journalism in war zones. But you might ask yourself, what has Canada done as a country to recognize the legacies of these Canadian soldiers.
We look at the legacy through the eyes of Canada's Silver Cross mothers. These women have endured unimaginable loss. They lost a child in service to our country. The Silver Cross they wear symbolizes not just personal loss, but the bravery of their sons and daughters and the profound sacrifice left by their families and community. The story we tell today is not just about war, but of the grief and their strengths. 10 years ago, our community faced unimaginable loss. Sergeant Carrie Janice and Captain Matthew Daw were taken from us during the war in Afghanistan. These weren't just soldiers, they were sons, uncles, fathers, and family. For their families, the war came home in ways words can hardly capture. But why? Why did they fight? Many ask this question. For 13 years, Canada's soldiers served in Afghanistan to help build a more stable and peaceful world. For soldiers like Sergeant Carrie Janice and Captain Daw, it wasn't just about fighting a war. It was about making a difference. They believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves and giving hope to a country ravaged by conflict. This war was bigger. It was part of a coalition of countries responding to terrorism on a massive scale. Was it a war of ideology? A war for freedom? Or was it something else? These are the questions we continue to ask ourselves today, 10 years later. Sergeant Carrie Janice and Captain Matthew Daw and soldiers like them were not just fighters, they were leaders. Their sacrifices created legacies that endure in our community. So what can we, the next generation, do? We can begin by asking ourselves the tough questions. What have we truly learned about terrorism, about war, about what it means to fight in the 21st century? We need to reflect on what Canadians as a nation expect of themselves, how we prepare for the challenges ahead, how we make sure the sacrifices of our soldiers are not in vain. And above all, we need to lead, to be leaders in our communities, in our countries, and in the world, not by wielding power, but by upholding the values that our soldiers fought for: compassion, integrity, and peace. And so, as we reflect on the war in Afghanistan, we return to the Silver Cross mothers. Their quiet strength and enduring sorrow remind us that the cost of war is measured in the lives forever changed. These mothers, who wear the Silver Cross with dignity, ask only one thing: that we never forget the legacy of their children, and that we work towards a world where fewer families must bear this burden, a world filled with hope for everyone, not terror. Their grief and their children's courage must guide us forward. That is their legacy, and it is now our responsibility.